Welcome to another edition of Capital Preview, brought to you by MediaCom. I'm Bill Peard, and this program profiles our state senators and representatives on issues important to them and their constituents. Our guest today is Senator Charles Schneider, Republican from District 22. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Good. Well, I'm going to jump right in because we got a big agenda today to talk about. And first of all, I'd like you to kind of go through the revenue growth has been slowing down, and we're all aware of that. Mm-hmm. What impact has that budget? What impact on the budget does that have? How will you be working on it?
Yeah, it has a significant impact on the budget. As you mentioned, revenue growth is still growing, but it's growing at a slower rate than what the Revenue Estimating Conference had originally projected. The REC, or Revenue Estimating Conference, met last December, and at that meeting they projected that we would have about $153 million in quote-unquote new revenue available for the upcoming budget year. And I know that sounds like a lot of money to most people, but when you put it in the context of a $7 billion plus budget, and you think about the funding increases that we've already committed ourselves to for education and Medicaid, that $153 million doesn't go very far. So what I'm advocating for and what our Senate Republican caucus is advocating for is making sure that we stick to our fiscally responsible roots, and that we're making sure that we're not spending more money than we're taking in, that we're not using one-time sources of revenue for ongoing expenses, and that we're properly matching revenue and expenses for the same fiscal year.
Sure.
And that means we'll probably need to set some priorities, because we may need to make some cuts in other areas. So we believe we ought to make sure that we're prioritizing education, public safety, Medicaid, those types of things.
Okay. Senator, during the condition of the state address, the governor announced a plan to support school infrastructure and a plan to support water quality. How would his plans work?
Yeah, what he wants to do is use an existing revenue stream called the SAVE Fund to fund both school infrastructure and water quality. Mm-hmm. And those are both important issues.
Sure.
Our kids need to be going to schools that are sound and aren't crumbling around them. And we also need to have clean water. That's been an issue that's been in the news quite a bit lately. So what the governor's proposing is using this SAVE Fund. The SAVE Fund is a 1% statewide sales tax that the legislature passed in 2008. And it was intended for school infrastructure, but it's set to expire at the end of 2029. Now, what the governor's proposing to do is to extend that SAVE Fund by 20 years and use the additional revenue for school infrastructure and also a smaller portion of it for water quality. So between now and the end of 2049, if I remember the numbers correctly, his plan would allocate about $20 or $21 billion for school infrastructure and about 4.7 for water quality.
Water quality has become a huge issue, it seems like, in the last year, a little over a year. Mm-hmm. So why do you think the governor has all of a sudden well, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, but has become a priority for him this year?
Well, I think he's been listening to people who've been talking to him about the need to get something done. Mm-hmm. And a lot of different groups are advocating for finding a solution to the underlying problem right now. And it's an issue that is important to all Iowans. Mm-hmm. It's important to agriculture. It's important to people who live in the suburban metro area in my district. And it's important to the health of our state overall. Mm-hmm. So I think he's looking for a solution that he thinks may pass legislative muster. Mm-hmm. A lot of the solutions that have been proposed so far haven't gained much traction. The budget is tight, so we haven't been able to just create money to fund for water quality. So I think what he's trying to do is take an existing source of revenue and by extending it a little further, using some of that existing revenue stream to put toward water quality. And we'll see what happens with it. I'll keep an open mind on it.
Sure.
I'll want to get input from all sides and hear what people have to say and see the actual bill before I make up my mind.
So who are the big people leading the charge on this water quality issue? I mean, I know it's coming from a lot of different directions, but are there some organizations that are kind of rising to the top as far as?
Well, the Greater Des Moines Partnership has, they launched a commission. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but
Sure.
it has been meeting over the last several months to come up with some proposed solutions. So that's one group that's been heavily engaged. And I'm sure others have as well. I couldn't tell you every single entity that has had a seat at the table or has talked to the governor about water quality, but
No, I was just, if you had a couple that came to mind, because it is becoming at the forefront of a lot of talk up at the Capitol.
Yeah.
And so I was just.
And there's obviously the Des Moines Water Works lawsuit of
Sure.
the drainage
Yeah, I'm sure
districts
that-
in northwestern Iowa. That played a role in it too, to move the conversation forward at least. I don't agree with the lawsuit itself, but nevertheless, the fact remains that I think it has pushed the issue to the forefront.
You know, another thing, I'm going to change gears here a little bit, Senator. The Iowa business tax climate has been a big issue for you. So how competitive is Iowa right now in the as far as business taxes go?
Well, there's a group called the Tax Foundation that does a ranking every single year of all the states from best to worst business tax climate. And this year they ranked Iowa 40th out of the 50 states. And Iowa has consistently ranked 40th or 41st in this survey. And there's also census and IRS data that shows that Iowa is losing wealth and people to other states with better tax climates than what we have. So I think it's an important issue. And I think that the fact we're losing people and businesses to other states symbolizes that it's an important issue. I know it's just one factor that people and companies look at or take into consideration when they're deciding where to locate or whether to even stay in Iowa.
Right.
But a lot of the factors that businesses and people take into consideration are factors that are outside of our control. Where we can't move mountains here
Right.
or oceans.
Right.
We can't make Iowa have pleasant weather year-round, but we do control what our tax rates are.
Sure.
So I think it's time that we take a look at our overall tax structure, meaning our income tax, our sales tax, our property tax, and others, and make sure that we have rates that are competitive, because we need to grow as a state. We're pretty flat when it comes to revenue growth. We have companies that are looking for jobs. We continue to lose people, new graduates, high school and college, to other states. And if we want the state to grow, then we need to turn this around.
Senator, if and maybe I missed it when you mentioned it. So if you reduce the business tax, the commercial property tax in Iowa, how would you make up for that in lost revenue? I mean, how do we continue to have a balanced budget, which you guys are charged with bringing in every year? So how do you make up for that?
Now,
loss?
that's a great question. And let me talk about income tax as an example, use that as an example. We have a lot of tax credits and tax deductions that we rely on to help spur economic growth right now. I think there are probably several of those programs that we could eliminate and also lower the rates and still generate enough revenue to make sure that we're funding government properly. But we do need to make sure we have enough revenue, and we need to be responsible about it. We don't want to be like other states that have slashed income tax only to see their credit ratings downgraded. Because if that happens, that makes it more expensive for the state to borrow money when it needs to borrow money, and that's just not a healthy place for us to be. So it's something we need input on from a lot of different people, and something we need to think about very carefully.
Senator, you've served on the Public Retirement System Committee, which met a couple of times a month. Have met a couple of months ago. I'm sorry. What is the current condition of the state pension systems right now?
Well, we have 4 public pension systems in Iowa, and they're all underfunded right now to varying degrees. The biggest pension system is IPERS, and it is 84% funded, meaning it has a $5.45 billion, that's with a B, unfunded liability. And the other pension system that's important for a lot of cities within the Des Moines metro area is the 411 system. And that system is 81% funded, I believe, and has a $530 million unfunded liability. So I'm worried about the long-term health of these programs. The boards of the programs decide how much money to set aside to meet future obligations, and those decisions are driven by certain assumptions that they make. I think we ought to take a look at those assumptions and make sure they're accurate. And for example, the IPER system projects or assumes that it will have a 7.5% return on investment over the next 30 years. But its own investment consultant believes that the rate of return will be less than that for the next 10 years. So that means from years 11 to 30, the system would have to earn a return greater than 7.5% just to make sure it's meeting that average over 30 years. So I'm not sure that's realistic anymore, 7.5%. And that may mean that the unfunded liability is actually larger than what we're projecting right now. And if that's the case, so be it, but we need to know that. We need to have all the information in front of us.
So what are those returns tied to, Senator, the 7.5? How do they come up with that rate for?
Oh, they have a consultant that puts that together for them. That the consultant puts together a proposed investment portfolio that will include things like equities, real estate, fixed income.
Same as our 401k.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it is kind of scary considering what our stock market's doing, what it's doing.
We're officially in correction territory right now. We're down 10% from our most previous high. The Dow is.
Yeah.
When I say we, I mean the Dow.
Right.
So already things aren't looking great as far as returns on equity investments for this year. And
could get out of control pretty fast.
I don't think we ought to be gambling on Wall Street when it comes to making sure that we're adequately providing retirement security for our public employees and that we're making promises to our taxpayers that they're going to have to ultimately fund at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think we're all, both individually, corporately, and legislatively, we're all watching, what those rate of returns are. You're the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee. What issues will you be discussing this year in your committee?
I think we'll have a few issues come up that we've had conversations on over the last few years as well. Human trafficking is one issue that we as a Judiciary Committee have worked in a bipartisan fashion to try to address. It's a big problem, and it's bigger than a lot of people realize. So we need to find a way to make sure that we're punishing the people who are trafficking people, and that we're also helping to identify who the real victims are here and that we're assisting them and getting them out of that system. Another issue that I hope we address is people who are habitual domestic abusers. The governor proposed a bill last year, as did a couple of other legislators, that would have punished more severely people who habitually commit domestic abuse crimes. And unfortunately, nothing came of that. I think that there are people, and I'm one of them, who still wants to work on this to make sure that we're finding a solution to the problem. So that's another issue that I believe we'll be discussing. And those are probably the two big ones.
Those are big, yeah. You recently traveled to China as part of the Young Leaders Exchange Program. What was the purpose of that trip? And I bet that was fascinating, knowing the condition that China's in right now.
Yeah.
And what they're going to do in the world in the future. So.
Yeah, that was a fascinating trip. I was one of 7 elected and government officials who traveled over and met with local Chinese elected officials. In addition to me, there was a state senator from the state of Nevada. There were 3 Germans, a Brit, and an Italian. And we went to Beijing and Qinghai province, which is in rural western China, and met with local elected officials. We attended seminars on the current state of China's economy and their role in the global marketplace. And we learned a lot as a result of that. And China is an important trading partner for the state of Iowa. We have significant differences with them at the federal level, and I think it's important that our foreign policy reflect that. But as state legislators, we also need to promote our state interest. And being over there, I think there's a lot of room for Iowa to do even more trade with China. They're our 4th largest trading partner right now. When we were in Qinghai province, I saw people harvesting hay by hand And the farm equipment that they did have was antiquated compared to what we have.
It's hard to
So
believe.
it is.
They are.
But it also shows you the room and the opportunity there
Yeah.
is for Iowa. We could sell farm equipment over there or farm implements. As their middle class continues to grow and has more disposable income, that leaves more room for our financial products like insurance and pension investments and those types of things. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you on Capital Preview today, Senator. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for our edition of Capital Preview.